Very good morning to you. Welcome to my thought for the day. Today, I want to tell you a story. It's contained in 1 Samuel, and the beginning of the story is in chapter 11, and the end of it is in chapter 23. So it's impossible for me to give you all the verses and read it all. It's a very complicated story. It's a family story, but it underlines the importance of those verses that perhaps you find very difficult to read, and I find them very difficult to read, and that is those verses that are lists of names, genealogies, or lists of people who did certain things. And in this case, a list of the people who served David as one of his heroes, one of his strong men, outstanding warriors. And in that list is a verse which gives us real insight into a personality that doesn't really get much acclaim. You may not even have heard of Ahithophel, but he was, as it says in 2 Samuel 16:23, he was a well-known advisor to David and then to Absalom, David's son. He was such a good advisor. His advice was so valued, it was as if it was a word from God. Ahithophel. So why is he important? And what is this all about? Stay with me. If you find it difficult to follow the names in this, there's lots of names in this because it's a family and it's intertwined. But I'll try and keep it as brief as I can without going into the details. But it starts with the encounter that David had with Bathsheba. You remember that David didn't go to war that particular year, and he was at home and he saw Bathsheba and he lusted after her and he slept with her. She became pregnant. And when Uriah, her husband, would not go to his home when he brought him back from the battlefield, so that the baby might look as if it was Uriah's, when that didn't work, that scheme didn't work, David sent messages to his commander-in-chief to put Uriah, who was a very brave soldier. He's listed as one of David's 30 heroes. He sent him into the fiercest part of the battle, and he was killed to get him out of the way. And then David married Bathsheba. And then we know that David was told about his sin, and the child died. And then David married Bathsheba. And that's the straightforward story about Bathsheba. And Bathsheba is forgiven by God, and David is forgiven by God. And the next child they have is Solomon, who becomes the next king. So that's one part of the story. It's important. That's an important part. They're well-known names. Now we come to David's other sons. David had many wives, and David's firstborn son, his name was Amnon. He was born to one of David's wives. And then his third son was Absalom, born to a different wife, so half-brother to Amnon. And Absalom's mother and David had a daughter called Tamar. So Absalom and Tamar are full brother and sister, and Amnon is half-brother to both of them. Then we have this awful moment when Amnon lusts after his half-sister Tamar. And he schemes and decides to fake illness so that he can plead that Tamar will come to his house and cook something for him, special for him, to help him recover from his illness. And when she's alone with him in his bedroom, he rapes her. And then he hates her more than he loved her, it says, and he turns her out. And Tamar goes back to her brother, her whole brother Absalom, and lives with him in his house for the rest of her life in shame, and never marries. And David, their father, the father of all three of them, doesn't do anything. He doesn't deal with Amnon. He doesn't care for Tamar. He doesn't do anything. It just says he was angry. He was angry at what his children had done. They were adults, of course, but he was angry with what they'd done, but he didn't do anything. And for 2 years, this ill treatment of his sister ate away at Absalom's heart. And when his father didn't do anything to revenge the shame that Tamar had experienced, Absalom took it into his own hands after 2 years and invited Amnon to a feast and killed him. And then David banishes Absalom from his presence. And Absalom is away for a long time. And the rebellion in his heart festers. It festers and it festers. And eventually there's a way that he's brought back to Jerusalem, but he doesn't see his father. He comes back to Jerusalem. And when he comes back to Jerusalem, he starts to gather the affections of the people away from his father David towards himself. And there comes a day when he's got enough backing that he goes to Hebron with a whole company of people and he's declared king. So we have David in Jerusalem and Absalom in Hebron. And David, when he hears that Absalom has declared himself king, flees from Jerusalem with all his company of people. He flees out of Jerusalem and leaves Jerusalem for Absalom to come in and set himself up as king. He doesn't challenge Absalom to a fight. So that's what's happened. All of this has happened. David is on the run again, away from Jerusalem. He has a whole entourage of people with him, but Absalom has been declared king by a huge number of supporters, many of whom may well have been enticed by this mismanagement of the Tamar incident. And Ahithophel, who we talked about at the beginning, Ahithophel, who was David's counselor, changes sides. He's been supporting David all his life as David is king. But when Absalom is declared king, Ahithophel changes sides and goes to Absalom and becomes his advisor. And David knows that he's going to give good advice. He's always given good advice. And the advice he gives to Absalom is, pursue David immediately. Don't wait for him to sort himself out and gather his strength. While he's running away, chase him and defeat him, and you'll be established as king. But there is another person giving advice who David has sent to Absalom, who is on David's side, and he gives the contrary advice. He says, no, wait until you're properly established in Jerusalem, until you give yourself time to establish and get your army together, and then go after David. And Absalom listens to that alternative advice. And as a result, David defeats Absalom because David has enough time to regroup. And when Absalom comes after him, he defeats Absalom and Absalom is killed. So where does the genealogy come into play with this? Well, the key to it is in 2 Samuel 23:34. It's one little verse. And it says that Ahithophel has a son whose name is Eliam. And back at the beginning of the story of David and Bathsheba, in 2 Samuel 11, verse 3, David sent and inquired about the woman, and someone said, "Is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" So Ahithophel is the father of Eliam, and Eliam is the father of Bathsheba. So right at the beginning, when David disgraces his granddaughter, Ahithophel watches. He sees his granddaughter treated very badly, and he sees his son's companions who are heroes with him. That's recorded in 2 Samuel 23:34. In that list is Uriah the Hittite, and there were many people who died in the battle when Uriah died. So that here we have David sowing the seeds of rebellion in the act that he made when he took in adultery the granddaughter of his own counselor, Ahithophel. She was his granddaughter. She was shamed. Her husband was murdered. The husband was a companion of his son one of the mighty men of David, who served David, working together for David and fighting for David. And in Ahithophel's heart was anger and bitterness towards David for the things he did around the affair with Bathsheba, which affected him and his granddaughter, his grandson-in-law, and the mighty men that died on that battlefield. And that those seeds of rebellion resulted in Ahithophel changing sides. And when his advice was not taken by Absalom, and he knew that David was going to get back into Jerusalem, he knew his life was doomed. And he went home and he put his affairs in order and he hanged himself. How sad. When we look at the story of Bathsheba, David and Bathsheba, we think it only affected him, and it only affected him and the baby that they bore together. But it affected the whole family, because David never treated the adultery, the fornication of his son seriously, just like he hadn't really taken his own adultery very seriously. But you see, you only really understand Ahithophel's actions when you see how his name appears in these genealogies, in 2 Samuel 11:3 and 23:34. It's a fascinating story. But whatever we do bears consequences. And all the way through, we have to come to the Lord on every new circumstance and ask for his help to deal with what is happening in our lives and in our families' lives. As we seek to serve the Lord, we can learn from the story of Ahithophel that this man was a very wise man, but in his heart there was an unresolved upset and anger at what David had done. And he hid it very well, but the rebellion came at last. My time is long up. I hope that's helped. Don't think of genealogies the same way ever again. God bless you. Have a great day. Bye-bye for now.